Hello Linux fans, Rob here and welcome to Linux Quest. As always, thank you for watching. So my intention was to do my typical video review of Black Lab Linux. Now, that's a twofold reason. So I had a viewer request on the Linux Quest site, and I saw my friend across the pond, Sudo Reboot, had done a video on Black Lab Linux, a very good video, Sudo, on Black Lab Linux, and it had KDE, and I'm a KDE fan, so had lots of reasons. I thought, hey, great, this is my next video review. So ran into some issues, so I did the install last night. Installed just fine. For those of you who don't know, Black Lab Linux version 8 is based off of Kubuntu, so the installer was the Kubuntu installer. No issues, installed no problems. There were 98 packages to update, went in, did the update, went in to set up my hardware, and that's where I ran into issues. So I had problems with the sound settings. So there were crashes, not system-wide crashes, but sound setting crashes with my hardware, my external mic, things like that. So I scratched my head and thought, okay, user error, I'm having a bad evening, I'm not doing something right, and lo and behold, I just couldn't get it figured out. So I decided to do a reinstall, which I did, and mixed results there. So no crashes, but I still couldn't get my hardware to properly configure or nothing to work. So we're going to do this one different than my typical video review. For what it's worth, I wanted to carry on, and I really want to share with you here where I see Black Lab Linux compared to, say, KDE Neon and, of course, Kubuntu. So let's just jump into some things here. Again, this is going to be different than the typical video install, so we'll move this over here. I went ahead and I recorded the video, and so I want to point out a few things. Now I'll mention here, I'm going to go ahead and pause here. I'll mention here that I did install K-Info Center. For whatever reason, that was not pre-installed, even though there's quite a selection of pre-installed software within Black Lab. K-Info Center was not, so I installed that because I wanted to be able to just show you here what we're working with. So again, it's based off of Kubuntu 16.04 with KDE Plasma version 5.5.5, Qt 5.5.1, and then the kernel is 4.4.0-47 generic. Now I believe when Sudo Reboot did his install, it was 4.5 generic, so it may be that there was an update since then. Now, I talk about KDE Plasma 5.5.5 because that is a fairly old version as far as I'm concerned. I'm currently running Plasma 5.8.3 through Antergos. Been running that for several weeks now, and knock on wood, it's been a great experience for me. So for me, with Black Lab, I see no reason to revert back to 5.5.5. 5.8.3 has been very stable. It's been very good for me. I've really enjoyed it. So right out of the gate here, I'm a little disappointed to see 5.5.5. Now I haven't run Kubuntu in some time, so I'm not exactly sure what Plasma version is running on Kubuntu currently. But I will say that in the past, I've had nagging little issues with Kubuntu. Nothing major system-wide crash-wise or anything like that. Nothing catastrophic to speak of, but I've had issues nonetheless. So I moved from Kubuntu to KDE Neon. So I want to make just a few points here, and we'll go ahead and start the video running again. So with KDE Neon, what you're going to find is a very minimal install. However, what you're going to have is an opportunity to experience the latest that KDE Plasma has to offer. So, where does Black Lab Linux fit in? Well, it's kind of interesting. I'm going to pause here as well. If you are, fairly experienced with Linux and you know your way around installing software and that kind of thing, you could take a look at KDE Neon from the aspect of it's based on Ubuntu, which Kubuntu is based off of, which then in turn Black Lab Linux is based off of. So you're running off of an Ubuntu base any way you look at it. You could take a look at KDE Neon, which will offer you more in the way of current KDE Plasma Qt version, the Plasma desktop version, more current up-to-date software at a very minimal install, and then you can go in and install what works for you. Now with Kubuntu, again, having small nagging issues, if you're looking for stability, perhaps Black Lab Linux offers a level of stability that's not available within Kubuntu. I haven't ran those two long enough to know for sure whether that's the case or not. Now there's another reason then that you may want to look at Black Lab, and that is for the pre-installed software. So let's just go ahead and run through here. Now we're going to talk a little bit here briefly about memory. At cold boot, I came in looking at my notes here at 705 megabyte. This is going to be a little different here because there's video recording running in the background showing 935 megabyte of usage. I'm not going to get hung up on that, so you're coming in somewhere around 7. You know, if you're running 8 gigs of RAM, as my friend Big Daddy says, hey, what's the big deal? You got, 7 other gigs of RAM to choose for, or to use there. So I found too that there were a few pieces of software I just wasn't familiar with, and let's back up just a minute here to let's see here. Let me find that. Again, this is not the way I typically do a video. So I found kind of an extraordinary number of software packages to choose from under graphics. And I'm not sure, I'm going to go back now and read into this, but I'm not sure if Black Lab is focused towards people who do graphics editing or photo manipulation. But this is the largest pre-installed selection of graphic software I believe I've seen in a distribution in quite some time. Everything from D&G converter, can't talk today, to Expo blending, GwenView, the Hugin suite there of Calibrate, Panorama, on and on. Ocular UC, Panorama is something you typically don't see, Photo Layout Editor, and Scanlight you typically see. But that's quite the selection. So I'm going to say that if that's something you work with a lot, with photo editing and manipulation, perhaps this is a distribution you'd want to take a look at. Now we'll go ahead and hit play from here. There were also several other surprising software or apps pre-installed. ICE, for example, was pre-installed. Now, while I'm happy to see ICE, it's typically not something that you see installed on a KDE focused distro. ICE, which will pop up here shortly, allows you to take an online application, say Google Drive or something like that, Gmail, and put it in a window environment that allows you to maximize and minimize and treat it like any other app that is running resident on your system. And I popped into photo layouts because, again, this was new to me. I hadn't seen that before. And then we'll pull into ICE, I believe, here in a minute. Under Internet. Now, the other thing I'll speak to, no Firefox pre-installed. Instead, you have Chromium as your default web browser. Dropbox is installed, I believe, under the ICE SSB manager. And again, here you'll see that. So I just wanted to kind of run through some of those pre-installed software bits that you typically don't see in a lot of cases, certainly in a KDE based or KDE desktop environment. And I find it kind of an odd mix. Now I'm going to go ahead, let me go back. Let's back up here. This is, again, not the best way to do a video review, but it's what I'm dealing with right now. So I want to point out two things here. You've got Discover and you've got Synaptic Package Manager. Now, Discover is the tool that you would use in the KDE desktop environment to install, to discover software and to install software. That was another letdown here, in that this is the earlier version of Discover, which is pretty sad. So I'm glad to see Synaptic there, but you've got those two choices. I feel like maybe a better option there would have been Synaptic and perhaps the Ubuntu App Center or something like that, perhaps, because Discover is, in its earlier version, is a pretty poor alternative for software management, in my opinion. The newer version does a better job, although it's not perfect. So again, they're kind of torn. For me, I could not see a scenario where I would go away from what I'm running now to Black Lab Linux. In fact, if I had to choose on an Ubuntu based distribution, for me it would be KDE Neon in order to be running the most current version of KDE. So that would be my focus there. And then a lot of the software that I see pre-installed here is simply software that I wouldn't use. So for example, we have this Pingai builder here, and I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, which allows you, it's interesting, it allows you to go in once you've set up your distro and you've installed or removed whatever software that you're going to set up and uninstall or install, allows you to create a distribution that you can then share with your friends. So that aspect of it is interesting. I just find it odd that that's pre-installed. I'm not sure exactly where the user focus is here, and having gone to the Black Lab website and read, they talk about being one of the, in fact we could pull that up, but let me just take a minute and go to Black Lab here. Let's see. And I found it interesting that they talk about, under Why Black Lab, that it is the only Linux distribution that truly focuses on ease of use for the general computer user. And I just find that kind of bold statement like that kind of odd, because it's not the only distribution out there that truly focuses on ease of use for the general computer user. I can think of many other distributions that focus on ease of use. There are several out there. So, when I read that, it kind of gave me a moment to pause there and say, okay, well, what are you doing that's going to be so radically different? And I'm not coming down on Black Lab Linux. I think, under the right scenario, it would be a perfectly fine distribution for someone who is looking for, a KDE desktop environment and a stable Ubuntu/Kubuntu base. You see GDebi package installer there. So everything's in place for a user to jump in. I mean, your Office suite is there, plenty of graphics editing software there, a Synaptic package manager is there, and then your typical utilities and things like that. So yes, overall I will say it is a very usable distribution, or could be a very usable distribution. Is it a distribution for someone who wants the latest and greatest from the KDE environment? No. You have other choices for that, be it an Arch-based distro like Antergos, where you have the latest version, or be it KDE Neon, which was designed really, or conceived, in order to allow you, I don't like that screen flicker, we're going to move on from there, in order to allow you to experience the latest and greatest that KDE has to offer. So for me, if I was going to go again with that Ubuntu/Kubuntu base, well, in the case of KDE Neon, it's Ubuntu based, I would go with Neon. Otherwise, I would stick with what I have for a very current and stable Plasma 5.8.3, as opposed to reverting back to 5.5. So would I say don't try this, pass this up? No, I would say, if you've been using Black Lab and your experience has been good, then this has been an updated version here with a newer KDE Plasma than what you had before. This may be a good alternative for you. If you've had problems with Kubuntu in the past, perhaps this is a more stable operating system than Kubuntu. Maybe they've added some packages here that work well for you, so this would be a good option for you. Otherwise, it's one that I personally would pass up. I feel like there are better options. So I'm going to leave it at that and kind of wrap this one up. I've gone on a little too long, maybe because this is not my typical way of doing a video review. I feel a little out of place. So, again, check out Sudo Reboot's video on this. It was a very good in-depth look at Black Lab as well. So I apologize again for having to do it in this format. But I'd made some promises to some viewers and kind of wanted to do the best I could there. And so anyway, we'll leave it at that and wrap it up, and check you later. Thanks for watching.